Before we get started, a quick reminder. The Crime Shack is listener supported. If you'd like to help us keep telling these stories, you'll find the support link in the show notes or at thecrimeshack.com. The Crime Shack exists because of listeners like you. Your support makes each episode possible. Check out the link in the show notes or visit thecrimeshack.com to join our community. This podcast contains content that may not be suitable for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Crime Shack. I'm your host, Michelle Pense, and as always, I'm so glad you're here with me. If this is your first time joining, welcome to the family. And if you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back to dive into these cases with me. For so many women, stepping outside isn't freedom, it's strategy. Keys threaded between fingers, headphones low, location shared, quick glances behind to make sure no one is following. We shouldn't have to live like this. Always watching our backs, always wondering if the person we pass wants to hurt us or worse. But too often, vigilance isn't enough. We've seen it before in cases like Laken Riley, the University of Georgia nursing student who was murdered in February 2024. And we'll be talking about that harsh reality in this episode, how an ordinary run can become a breaking point. Today, we follow a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, someone who just laced up to exercise, whose future was stolen by one man's selfish desires, by his violent entitlement, by the simple fact that he couldn't take no for an answer. We examine how an ordinary run ended in violence and the hard truths it forces us to face. Mollie was born on May 8, 1998, in San Francisco, California, to Rob Tibbetts and Laura Calderwood. Her parents divorced when she was in the second grade, and she moved with her mother and two siblings from a big city in California to a much smaller town in Iowa. She remained close with her father despite the move. During her childhood, she would split her time between California and Iowa, attending the Brooklyn Guernsey Malcolm Junior High School in Brooklyn, Iowa, where she was a member of the choir, participated in school plays and musicals, and graduated in 2017. During her childhood, she would split her time between California and Iowa. She attended the Brooklyn Guernsey Malcolm Junior High School in Brooklyn, where she was a member of the choir, participated in school plays and musicals, and graduated in 2017. Brooklyn, Iowa was located in the middle of rural Iowa and had a population of around 1,500 people in 2018. If you pull up the town on Google Maps, you'll see that it's completely surrounded by expansive farmland, primarily cornfields and soybean fields. After high school, Mollie got a job working with kids through a local day camp program tied to Grinnell Regional Medical Center and also did some dog sitting on the side. She went on to attend the University of Iowa, where she studied psychology and aspired to get a doctorate. Her family and friends would describe her as spunky and energetic, and someone who was happy and positive all the time. Her family would say she was kind, caring, and didn't have a mean bone in her body. It was July 18, 2018. Mollie had been staying at her 20-year-old boyfriend Dalton's house in Brooklyn. The two had met and began dating while they were both students at Brooklyn Guernsey Malcolm High School and had been in a long-term relationship ever since. Dalton and his brother Blake, who also lived at the house with him, had been out of town working at a construction job in the Dubuque area, about 140 miles away, and Mollie had agreed to house sit for them to care for their dogs. At 5:30 p.m., Mollie was dropped off at Dalton's house by her brother Jake. Even though it was a humid midsummer evening, roughly 80 degrees with about 60% humidity and almost no breeze, Mollie had planned to go out for a run that night. Running was a normal part of her routine. It cleared the day and reset her mind. She sent a few messages on her phone, laced up her sneakers, and stepped out into the warm night. She knew the neighborhood well, and it was customary for her to run about 45 minutes each day. She planned the usual loop: a few residential blocks, across to a main road, and back before dark. It was just before 7:30 p.m. when she began her run. She jogged east along Pershing Drive and Boundary Street, a residential area, where Nate Howood and other neighbors later reported seeing her run by. She continued north onto Middle Street, passing her old high school and some more residential homes. Surveillance video footage then captured her running near East Des Moines Street. It was on this street that a black Chevy Malibu also started circling the area. Investigators believe she then headed east on 385th Avenue, also known locally as 200th Street, towards a rural road on the outskirts of town. By this time, she had run about 3 miles into her route, and it was about 8:20 p.m. But Mollie would never make it back to Dalton's house. That evening, several people tried to contact her after 8:20 p.m., but Mollie never opened or responded to any of them. Dalton Jack sent her multiple messages. Some of Mollie's friends texted her that night, and a couple of her family members, including her mother, also attempted to reach her after realizing that she hadn't been heard from. The next morning, the texts were still unread and calls rolled to voicemail. At around 10 a.m., Dalton opened up his Snapchat app. He saw a photo from Mollie. The image showed her indoors, lying on a bed, wearing black sports shorts and a pink sports bra. To him, it appeared as if she had just gotten back from her run because she looked relaxed. But Dalton had no idea he would never see Mollie again. When Mollie didn't show up for work at the Grinnell Daycare Center the next morning, and her family and friends couldn't reach her, they grew concerned. Dalton's brother Blake went to check on the house, and Dalton also drove back to Brooklyn that day to look for her. When he got to the house, Mollie's car was there, along with her wallet, ID, and keys, but there was no sign of Mollie. After continuing to receive no phone responses from Mollie, her mother, Laura Calderwood, filed the official missing person report with the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office on July 19, 2018. Family and friends retraced small details, trying to narrow down where Mollie could have been. They retraced the route that they thought she would have taken, the route she usually ran. They scoured over the last Snapchat Dalton received, searching for any clues to her whereabouts, and volunteers joined in the search, fanning out with maps and bottled water. As the day went on, people checked fence lines and culverts, walked tree lines, and peered into outbuildings. Investigators began collecting tips, pulling digital traces from her cell phone, and asked for camera footage from the homes and businesses along her likely path of travel. They also explored whether the Fitbit she'd been wearing at the time pulled and retained any data that could help reconstruct the last part of her run. Over the next weeks, hundreds of leads were chased. Over 2,000 tips poured in, and the reward fund managed through the Crime Stoppers of Central Iowa Fund that was originally $1,000 grew to over $170,000 by August 2018, one of the largest in Iowa history at the time. Detectives refocused searches around several specific sites in and around town while continuing to review home and city surveillance videos to catch anything unusual near her route. On July 27th, authorities questioned a local pig farmer named Wayne Cheney. Cheney came under suspicion because of the proximity of his farm to Brooklyn and because he had a history of harassment charges. He'd been convicted of stalking women in the past. Deputies questioned him at least twice, and they had him take a polygraph, which he said he failed. They also conducted searches of his property multiple times with cadaver dogs. Investigators collected items such as straw, corn stalks, and other materials from his land for testing. They also recovered a red shirt found in a field during one of their searches, thinking that it could have belonged to Mollie, but Cheney told them he didn't know how the clothing got there. After the shirt and other materials obtained from the property were collected as evidence, they were later ruled out as evidence connected to Mollie's disappearance. Cheney adamantly denied knowing Mollie and said he had nothing to do with her disappearance, although he did admit to having a reputation in the community, telling local media that he wasn't surprised that authorities were suspicious due to his criminal record. After being thoroughly investigated, Cheney did not end up being charged in connection with Mollie's disappearance or death. Then, in late July, one neighbor's camera became a pivotal point in the investigation. Investigators had been scrolling through days of footage and were logging every pedestrian and vehicle when a female runner with a ponytail, wearing black shorts and a pink sports bra, moved through the frame. Then they spotted a black Chevrolet Malibu with chrome trim appearing on the same blocks in the same window of time, looping past more than once. Within days of that discovery, deputies spotted a matching Chevrolet Malibu on the road and noted the license plate. The vehicle's registration was traced to 24-year-old local farm worker Christian Bahina Rivera. On August 20th, 2018, investigators contacted Christian Rivera. He was living in a small, secluded mobile home trailer at Yerraby Farms, a dairy farm about 3 miles south of Brooklyn. Once they arrived at Rivera's home, they did a search of his trailer and questioned him about his whereabouts on July 18th. During the initial interview, Rivera was calm and cooperative. He talked about his job at the Yerraby Dairy Farm, where he milked cows and did farm labor. The trailer he lived in was provided to him as employee housing. Investigators asked him to continue the conversation at the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office, and because Spanish was his first language, they brought in Officer Pamela Romero, a fluent Spanish speaker, to conduct the interview. Over the course of the 11-hour interview, Rivera denied any involvement in Mollie's disappearance, claiming he didn't know who she was. Then, after several hours with breaks for food and rest, they confronted him with still images of the Malibu that was captured on the neighborhood camera, driving past Mollie while she ran. He then admitted to Officer Romero that it was his car. He told her that he saw Mollie running and thought she was hot. He said he circled back around in his car for another look. He pulled up alongside her, rolled his window down, and tried to talk to her. Mollie got irritated and told him, "Leave me alone," or she'd call the police. Rivera claimed that after this short exchange, that he, quote, blacked out. He went on to say that he did not remember what happened next until he came to and realized he was driving with Mollie's body in his trunk. After further pressing him for what happened to Mollie's body, he admitted that he drove to a secluded cornfield. Once at the cornfield, he pulled Mollie's body out of the trunk, carried her into the field, covered her body with corn stalks, and left her there. By the early morning hours of August 21st, the interview had moved from the sheriff's station to the cornfield. Following Rivera's directions, investigators drove out along 460th Avenue, about 9 miles south of Brooklyn. They turned down a rural gravel road to a cornfield. As Rivera continued to guide the investigators, they walked down a row where the wind died down and the stalks pressed close. He then told them to stop. A few rows into the tall corn, investigators saw a place where stalks had been bent and folded back over themselves, making a kind of lid. It was beneath those stalks that they discovered Mollie's remains. She'd been covered with corn leaves and stalks to conceal her body. Before touching the body, they called a crime scene technician to come to the location of the remains. When the technician carefully lifted that canopy for photographs, the first thing that stood out was a bright-colored running shoe beneath the stalks. Mollie had been missing for 34 days. Her body had been exposed to the brutal summer heat, and the conditions were ideal for rapid decomposition. Her remains were mostly bones, with very little soft tissue remaining. Her body was partially unclothed. The heat and humidity of an Iowa July had done what heat does. Inside the rows, temperatures are even hotter than outside because the air doesn't circulate well. Because of the high humidity, the soil holds moisture. This creates a humid, suffocating environment. On July 18th, the temperature in Brooklyn had reached the upper 80s with humid conditions, meaning it would have felt like the mid to high 90s inside the cornfield. The location was roughly 60 feet into the field, far enough that you could stand on the gravel and see nothing at all. The soil is soft, often muddy between rows after the summer rains. Cornfields teem with bugs. Gnats, mosquitoes, and flies thrive in the heat and damp soil. The stagnant air and decaying vegetation provide ideal conditions for insects, which also accelerates decomposition of any organic material, including a body. Fallen corn leaves and stalk create natural debris on the ground. When Rivera placed Mollie's body and covered her with stalks, it would have blended into the natural environment, making her nearly invisible. After Mollie's body was found, Christian Rivera was formally charged with first-degree murder. Before we get to the rest of the story, I wanted to let you know that your support doesn't just keep the show going. It helps uncover stories that might otherwise stay hidden. Find the link in the show notes or at thecrimeshack.com. At the Iowa office of the state medical examiner, Dr. Dennis Garvin conducted the autopsy. Because weeks had passed in the summer heat, soft tissue degradation limited some of the tests. Garvin could identify 9 definitive stab wounds and suspected, conservatively, as many as 12 given the condition of the remains. The wounds involved the head, neck, chest, and other areas. One wound penetrated the skull, which itself could have been fatal. Lastly, he noted a hand injury consistent with Mollie's defensive effort to push the blade away. Due to the fact that the case was all over social media and the news, the trial was moved out of Poweshiek County to the Scott County Courthouse in Davenport, Iowa. Jury selection began in May 2021, and Judge Joel D. Yates of the 8th Judicial District Court would be presiding. The prosecution's case was straightforward. The main evidence included the video of Rivera's Malibu in the same area where Mollie had been running, DNA evidence from the scene of the crime, including blood found in Rivera's vehicle, and Rivera's own admissions to authorities. Among the state's witnesses, a neighbor whose cameras captured both a runner and the black Malibu looping the blocks was called to testify. They heard from the deputy who, by chance, spotted a matching Malibu days later and noted the plate, making the first contact with Rivera. Officer Pamela Romero testified, describing the 11-hour interview with Rivera and how, when he was shown a photo of his car on the same route as Mollie, admitted following the runner and ultimately led authorities to the cornfield. A Division of Criminal Investigation crime scene analyst then walked the jurors through the crime scene photographs. A photo of the corn stalks bent to form a cover or lid. A bright running shoe was visible just under the stalks, the other shoes separate from the body but nearby. Photos of her remains were shown, including photos of her sports bra that had been pulled up, exposing her chest. Her legs were positioned apart, and her underwear and shorts had been pulled down. A headband was found separate from her body and several feet away in the cornrows. Dr. Dennis Klein, who took over as the state medical examiner after Garvin retired, testified about Mollie's injuries. She had suffered multiple sharp force injuries, at least 9 to 12 stab wounds to her chest, ribcage, neck, and skull. He said that the pattern of injuries was consistent with a single-edged knife, though no weapon was ever recovered, and he couldn't rule out more than one blade. The skeletonized condition of the remains also meant he was unable to obtain useful fingerprints or blood samples from the body itself. Dr. Klein brought in a forensic anthropologist, Dr. Heather Garvin, to further evaluate the bones for any sharp force changes. Garvin identified additional sharp force defects, including to the cervical vertebrae, consistent with stab wounds through the neck that could injure major vessels and arteries. Due to Mollie's body being badly decomposed, it made it impossible to confirm or rule out assault through DNA or trauma evidence. Even without direct proof of rape, prosecutors argued that the way she was left was consistent with Rivera's pursuit of her during her run and supported their theory that the murder was sexually motivated. Together, their testimony helped jurors see the totality of Mollie's injuries, even where soft tissue had been lost. Then came the DNA evidence. Although the remains did not hold any fingerprints and there was no DNA other than Mollie's pulled from the crime scene where the body was found, there was blood that was found in Rivera's Chevrolet Malibu. A DNA analyst who testified at trial reported that blood recovered from trunk liners removed from the black Chevy Malibu matched Mollie's DNA. Jurors would listen to how those liners were removed, cut, photographed, preserved, and tested. But what investigators did not find was also pointed out. There was no murder weapon, and Mollie's phone, Fitbit, and earbuds were never recovered. A search warrant had been obtained for the Fitbit's digital activity. The data showed movement consistent with her evening jog on July 18th in the Brooklyn area. Her Fitbit had recorded activity up until 8 o'clock to 8:30 p.m., which aligns with the surveillance footage of Rivera's car circling the area. The Fitbit did not record any activity after that time frame, suggesting that she was attacked during or just after her run. The device was not able to pinpoint her exact location at the time of the attack, but it did help to narrow down the timeline. When the state rested and it was the defense's time to bring their witnesses, they started off by scrutinizing the interrogation with Rivera. They suggested that investigators pressured and influenced Rivera during the lengthy 11-hour interview and translations. They said that Rivera was worn out and tired through the interrogation and that investigators steered him through their version of the story. They emphasized to the jury what was missing: no primary crime scene, no murder weapon, and no eyewitnesses to the killing. They questioned aspects of the DNA and pointed the finger at alternate suspects, including references to rumors that law enforcement later dismissed. Then, in a surprise move, Rivera himself got up on the stand. With the video that showed his car circling Mollie being undisputed, what could he possibly say to excuse himself from being the one responsible for this crime? If you recall, Rivera told the investigators that he saw Mollie running, circled back to get a better look at her, confronted her, and when she rejected him, he blacked out. Now, testifying in his own defense in Spanish and with a translator, he came up with an entirely different story. Rivera told jurors that he did not kill Mollie, but that it was in fact two masked men, one armed with a knife and one armed with a gun, who were the actual perpetrators responsible for the murder. Let's listen to Rivera's testimony on the stand as he explains his version of events. For the sake of time, I'm going to include Rivera's own responses in the first couple of questions from his attorney so you can hear his voice. But for the remainder of the testimony, you will hear only the male and female translators' voices relaying Rivera's responses.
What did you see?
Dos personas en mi sala. Two people in my living room.
Did those men have any sort of weapons?
Yes.
Describe which man had which weapon?
The bigger one, I could see that he had a gun, and the smaller one, I could see that he had a knife.
What did these men say or do?
That I shouldn't do anything stupid and everything was going to be okay.
Once you left the house, what happened?
We got into the car.
Once you get to Brooklyn, what happens?
We went into town by what you could say would be the back way into town.
Who did you see?
A person jogging.
Let's talk about the last time that you drove by Miss Tibbetts. Does she make any statements or anything like that?
No.
She doesn't wave or anything like that?
No.
What happens next?
One of them got out of the car. Around like 12 minutes after that person comes back to the car, I've heard them opening the trunk and then that the trunk closed.
So they get out, is that right?
Yes. Before they leave, one of them tells me not to say anything about what had happened, that they knew Iris and that they knew my daughter, that if I said something, they would take care of them.
What happened next?
Well, obviously, I knew there was something in the trunk.
Did you look in the trunk?
Yes.
What did you see?
A body.
Was that the body of Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes. And then I decided to take the body out.
Describe her body.
It was very heavy.
What did you do next, sir?
The way I could, I picked her up and then I put her in the cornfield.
Did you cover her with corn?
Yes.
I'm an avid listener of the Body Language Experts, the Behavior Panel on YouTube, and they often refer to this type of defense from suspects. It's called the vanishing perpetrator. That type of suspect leaves no traces or evidence behind, and their presence is not obvious from interviews or video footage. Essentially, it's a convenient scapegoat or tactic for suspects to use if they know they cannot talk their way out of the evidence. During cross-examination, Rivera said that he could not identify the masked men, didn't see a car drop the men off at his trailer, and no other evidence at trial corroborated their existence. Rivera repeated that he only disposed of her body under duress and did not commit the murder himself. To address the possibility that Mollie's boyfriend could have murdered her, Dalton Jack was brought to testify. Dalton was emotional but composed on the stand. He testified that the last time he heard from Mollie was on July 18th before her run, and then he saw the Snapchat photo the next morning. He confirmed they'd been dating for about 3 years and were in a committed relationship. He talked about Mollie's habits, saying that she often went for runs in the evenings, and her not responding overnight did not immediately alarm him since she sometimes went to bed early. He testified that he had no involvement in her disappearance or death. Both Dalton and his coworker testified that they were working on a bridge project in Dubuque on the day Mollie had disappeared. When the defense cross-examined him, they pressed him on the state of his relationship with Mollie. He admitted that he had previously cheated on her about a year before she was murdered. Because of this, they questioned whether he was truly committed to her, raising doubts about motive or jealousy. But Dalton pushed back and stated firmly that he loved Mollie and would never hurt her. On May 28, 2021, after about 7 hours of deliberations, the jury found Christian Bahena Rivera guilty of first-degree murder. When the verdict was read, Rivera showed little visible emotion. He was sitting quietly, wearing headphones to hear the proceedings through a Spanish interpreter. He did not cry, speak, or visibly react when deputies handcuffed him and escorted him out. He remained calm and subdued. Mollie Tibbetts' family, who was seated in the gallery, was visibly emotional. Some were crying, others holding hands, in sharp contrast to Rivera's almost expressionless demeanor. And on August 30th, 2021, Rivera was given Iowa's mandatory sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Immediately following the guilty verdict, Rivera's attorneys filed for a new trial. They argued that Rivera's two masked men testimony had not been properly considered, and that new evidence had surfaced suggesting others may have been involved, including references to allegations that another man in the area had confessed while in jail. The judge denied this motion, stating the evidence was not strong enough to justify a new trial. Then, in 2022-23, an appeal was processed citing ineffective assistance of counsel, mishandling of certain evidence like DNA and cell phone data, and the court's refusal to allow further exploration into alternate suspect theories. But the Iowa Court of Appeals upheld his conviction in 2023. Rivera has since filed a petition for post-conviction relief, which is separate from a direct appeal. Post-conviction relief petitions typically argue that constitutional violations, ineffective counsel, or new evidence should justify relief. His attorneys continue to pursue the theory that other men, possibly connected to local crime activity, were responsible and not Rivera. As of 2025, these filings are still being processed through the courts. I think it's highly unlikely that Rivera will get a new trial, and he is currently serving out his life sentence in the Iowa State Penitentiary in Fort Madison, Iowa. Mollie's funeral was held at St. Patrick's Catholic Church in Brooklyn, Iowa, and it was a full house. Teammates and friends honored her with small ceremonies and with miles logged in her name. She was remembered for the ordinary things, her steadiness, her humor, and the way she said yes when someone needed help. In the end, we're left with a brutal simplicity. A young 20-year-old woman went for a run and never came home. In court, the defendant tried to outrun the evidence with a story about masked men and a convenient blackout, an invention the jury rejected and one that insulted the truth of what happened to Mollie. Her life, her ordinary plans, her small rituals, her future was ended senselessly by a man who felt entitled to her body and her attention. That is the hard truth we carry out of this case. Women are still asked to manage danger that others create to survive what they never invited. Remember Mollie Tibbetts not for how she was taken, but for how she lived. and let her name be a demand that we do better. Teach respect, confront entitlement, and build a world where a run is just a run. That's it, friends. Thank you for joining me. Head over to thecrimeshack.com and check out my revamped, amazing new website where you can find all my episodes and ways you can help support the show. Be sure to connect with me on social media and subscribe to my podcast on whatever platform you listen to your podcasts so that you don't miss the next episode. Until next time, stay safe, everyone. Every episode we make is fueled by listener support. If you'd like to help us create more, you'll find the link in the show notes or at thecrimeshack.com.